You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hello again, people-centric leaders. Matt Griswold, Don Harkey alongside as we are about to record, and we're not about to record, we're literally recording. Don literally hit record here to start this
Literally
podcast.
already hit the button and we heard the audio say recording in progress.
There is no taking it back now. Listen, we're excited to be back with another podcast episode here. And really, we're going to talk about the title of this is Great Managers Play Chess. Now, if you've followed People Centric for any amount of time, whether you've seen us speak in conferences, we've worked with your organization, you've listened to the podcast for a while, this is not a new phrase. This is not a new phrase. Great managers play chess. However, it is one of those phrases that we typically just choose to maybe gloss over as almost like to say, you get it, right? But if you were like me, for the longest time, maybe you didn't fully understand what that meant. Now, I've always known that there was a difference between chess and checkers. And the softball answer is because if I'm a manager, then I need to recognize that in chess, all of the different pieces do something differently, versus checkers, where they all kind of do the same thing. Until you get kinged, I get it, then the king can go everywhere, right? But typically, all of the pieces do the same thing. In chess, I had no context for this. Do you know why? Do you know why, Don? Do you know why I had no context for this?
Why did you have no context for this, Matt?
Thanks, Don. Because I was like many Americans who probably grew up with a chessboard in the household because it came with the checker set. You know what I'm saying? It came with the checker set, but you just kind of discarded the chess pieces because that's too difficult. And who wants to learn how to do that? So I grew up with chess pieces, and I knew they looked differently, but I grew up not knowing how to play chess. In fact, all the way, I don't know who can say this, but I bet there's a lot of us all the way into my 40s. I had no idea how to play chess until one magical day in Lexington, Kentucky. Don and I were on a trip, and this is just, I say one magical day like it happened years ago. It was not. Maybe a month and a half ago, maybe. We're in Lexington, Kentucky, and we were waiting for an airplane. Now, in Lexington, here's a side note. You're welcome. If there are any other club members like Admirals Club, Don and I fly a lot through American Airlines. We like to take advantage of the Admirals Club. But if you're in Lexington, there's not an Admirals Club, but there is a special club through a door that says if you're a member of any airline club at all, right? If you're cool at all, join us upstairs. And so we go upstairs. Don and I go upstairs, and it's much more laid back. There were no workers there. There were no people and there were no workers. We had the entire club to ourselves, which makes me wonder, maybe we shouldn't have been there. But anyway, we were there and the TVs were on and we were sitting in comfortable chairs, and Don notices there's a chessboard next to us, and he asked me, do you want to play chess? And I said, I don't know how to play chess. And Don, being a great friend there, said, well, do you want to learn how to play chess? And I said, sure, yeah. I mean, what else are we doing with our time? Teach me how to play chess. So Don goes through all the pieces, talks about what they can and what they cannot do, and at what point they can and cannot do. Because Don, the pawns can move at one pace, except for the first turn. They can go two paces ahead, but they can only attack diagonally. Like if you're not a person that likes tedious games, this might not be for you. But Don taught me well, and I got a hold of it really quickly. So I fast forward, and I'm like, this is fun. And I think my 11-year-old son Hudson, shout out to Hudson, I think would really like this. He's that kind of, he likes to dive in. He's attention to detail kind of a thing. Typically, he likes to dive in and learn more and tell me how and all that stuff. And so we bought a chess set at home. I don't even think I told Don. I bought a set, like a 10-game multi-thing at Walmart, and I brought it home, and I asked my wife, would she like to play? And I kind of gave her a tutorial, and I was ready to show my prowess as the chess champion of the Griswold household. And so far, if you're keeping track of score at home, it is my wife 5, Matt 0. I haven't won yet. I haven't beat her yet. And I had this epiphany. And Don, this is going to take us to what we're talking about, what we're going to talk about today with Great Managers Play Chess, because it's not only I have to understand what the pieces do, I have to also anticipate what they might do. And I have to anticipate what the opponent might do. I have to play out different scenarios, two or three plays ahead, to try to maybe maneuver or jockey into position to do something. And so, yeah, some of the pieces can only go diagonally, some of the pieces can go left and right, some of the pieces can only go one pace at a time. There's a lot going on the chessboard, and you have to not only be aware of what they are, but what it is that they do, and anticipate the needs of those things too, and anticipate the actions of those things. This is a lot like managing. This is a lot. If you're driving and you're listening to this podcast and you're going, "Dadgum, that sounds like my day. That sounds like my everyday." I am anticipating the heck out of things all the time, and I'm always, there's always a crapshoot. So, something always, goes wrong, or something always happens to where I didn't anticipate that. How do I maneuver out of that? Which is another kind of a life lesson that chess teaches you too, because the opponent will do something that throws your plan completely off. And now it's like, oh, new plan. I've got to re-strategize here. And what else can I do? And you have to look at the board kind of with fresh eyes. And so we're going to talk about this idea of good managers, great managers play chess. But maybe we could start with this premise, Don. Whenever I'm talking about this with great managers play chess, I also maybe back it up to define what it is my role as a manager should be in the first place, right? Am I just there to monitor the day-to-days, make sure the work gets done? I think there's probably some managers that have that hat on. My job is just to make sure the work gets done, right? But maybe great managers are sitting there going, I wonder if I have the ability to be able to impact how the work gets done also. I wonder if I have the ability to be able to impact or inspire my people to want to do great stuff anyway. And so I would say it like this, and then Don, I'll throw it to you. I would say, if my job as manager is kind of to ensure I'm trying to build the most diverse, most effective team that I can possibly build, right? Recognizing the players that I have on the field. And then hopefully I can make myself less and them more so they can be awesome without me being an obstacle in their way. So is that a good start to maybe how we would define what a great manager is looking to do with the team that they have in front of them?
Yeah, I think it's a great start. And I like your analogy of saying, like, if you're a manager, you might be thinking, well, that sounds like my job. But I'll bet there's even more managers sit back and say, like, that seems like the way my job should work. But the reality is, if I just manage the day to day, then really what it's like is you sat down with the board with a bunch of pieces that you didn't select. And in a game situation that you didn't select, you just had to figure out what the next move is. You're not thinking two or three moves ahead. You're not thinking, okay, how do I develop this person into this piece? Or even more, what you just said is like the nice thing about the game of management is that you can find new pieces for your board that do different things. And so a lot of managers struggle with the idea of getting lost in the day to day, and they forget that they can strategize and think about, what if I had a piece that moved more like a queen, where I can move all the way up, forward, diagonal, backwards, forwards, as many spaces as you want. It's the most powerful piece on the board. Or do I need another pawn to be able to help protect the king that's down here? Or do I need another rook? Or what do I need? So it's helping managers, I think, to think a little bit differently. But go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, you're, I love this whole thing. Like I never thought a month ago that I could talk this much about chess, but I feel like I'm learning more and more. And you might be a new manager and you're looking at your team going, all I have are pawns. All I have are pawns. In fact, one of the frustrating parts about chess to me, like as I'm trying to attack, my opponent, my wife, or maybe you the other day when we were playing, is sometimes the pawns are in the way. I have to just take them out because they're in the way because I'm trying to get to the king, and you might be looking at your team going, dadgummit, why are they only moving one step at a time? How come they're not able to do those things? And I think it's maybe a reality or kind of a newsflash for a manager going, man, some of that's on you. Some of that's on you, right? You talked about how do I develop them from a pawn maybe into more of a skill set of a queen. And I could just see people Googling chess pieces right now as they're trying to listen to this going, well, what the heck does a queen do? The point of that is saying that the queen can go everywhere. The pawn can go one step at a time. And you might be looking at your team going, how come these folks are only able to move one step at a time? And maybe that's because we haven't taken the opportunity to find out their skill set or to develop that skill set or delegate some of those responsibilities, right?
Yeah, so let's break this down because you're absolutely right. Like the chess players who are also managers are probably sitting back going like, I love this. This is really good. You're pointing out some things like I need to think about. How do I think 3 or 4 moves ahead? How do I control the pieces? How do I identify the pieces? But let's go back and if we're going to teach management, let's teach it like we teach chess or like we started with chess. And I learned the same way that you learned is when my dad sat down and taught me chess, is you go piece by piece. You have to learn what the pieces can do and you have to even start before that of knowing what the objective is. Like, what's the objective? How do you win this game? What does winning the game really look like? Which means you have to have a
Good point.
vision for the game. Because you sit down and first when you're playing chess, it's not like checkers where you're trying to kill all the other pieces. You're going after one piece in chess, right? You're going after the king. You're trying to destroy the king. And anything to destroy the king, even as you take other pieces, it's all in a gambit to try to get to the king at the end of the day. And if you destroy the king, it doesn't matter how many other pieces you have. You could have 2 pieces left, and the other person could have, all the pieces left. And if you still manage to trap the king, you can still get checkmate and you can still win the game. So it still shows what winning the game looks like. So you have to start with that. So what does winning the game for your team look like? And does everybody know that? In chess, because you literally control all the pieces, this is where the analogy maybe breaks down. You only have to know what winning the game looks like. In management, your pieces are going to move themselves. And you can kind of decide a little bit, you can kind of direct where they move. But in reality, the pieces are going to make some moves on their own, which means that the pieces have to know what winning the game looks like. So I think we'd probably start there.
It's not only that they will move on their own. I like how you said foundationally we have to determine why is it that you're playing the game in the first place. What's the objective? Now, as a manager, I do want them to kind of freely think for themselves. I ask people all the time, do I want people sitting and waiting for my direction, or do I want them already stinking clear on the direction? They're proactively charging ahead for me, and with me, right? Because they already know where we're going. But sometimes, if they are sitting and waiting, there's two different approaches that you can have for that too. If I'm a manager, I can say those darn pieces. But I think if we're talking about great managers, I think one of the skill sets of a great manager is to take some accountability in what your pieces are or are not doing, right? If we're talking, if we're equating this to what makes a great manager and why do they play chess, sometimes you might be looking at the players on the field there or the pieces on the board, and you're going, why are they doing what they're doing, and why aren't they doing what they're doing? And some of that maybe is because it's not really clear on what it is that we're supposed to be doing. At what point do you want me to do the thing? I think sometimes we also give our employees a tremendous amount of credit for already knowing the direction or already knowing the priority of things that I want them to be doing. And we kind of take a hands-off approach because we don't want to micromanage, but we need to be kind of hands-on a little bit as we're at least explaining what it is we're doing and why it is we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, this is a really fun analogy the more we dig into this, Matt, because you think
I
about
know.
if we played chess and you kind of change the rules, to me, like old school management is the manager will tell people what to do. So old school management is the traditional chess game. You're one player, controlling all the pieces, and the pieces can do different things, but it's up to the player to make those pieces move. I think what we're discovering is that in newer school management is that if you engage those pieces, that the pieces can then move themselves. And think about that for a second. If you and I play chess and you can only move one piece at a time, but I get to move all my pieces at once, that's a huge advantage for me if my pieces are all aligned and doing what they're supposed to be doing, which shows you the potential downside of new age management is the idea that if I allow my pieces to do their own thing is they could make mistakes. They could go the wrong direction. They could expose the king. If they're not coordinated, they could actually cause us to lose the game faster. So there's a higher upside, but there's also a bigger low side to that. So I think that the management takeaway for this piece is that not only do you have to know what winning looks like, but you have to make sure your pieces know too, because they are going to move themselves from time to time, whether you want them to or not. And you have a big advantage for letting them move themselves if you keep them aligned on knowing what it is that they do and what not just what winning looks like, but what role they play in winning. This could be a whole keynote. We could just be
I
we have a
know.
whole
I
new
know.
breakout session here. This could be a
For, we've copywritten this. Consider this copywritten. If you're we're putting a stamp on this right now. Right now. This is a keynote. This is a workshop. And I'm here for it. I like all of it. And I might not have been until I kind of learned how to play the game, learned how to play the game too. So if we're talking about great managers, again, if my job is to build the most diverse team that I could possibly build, what about this, and how far do we go down this path? How do I find out who's what?
Yeah.
How do I find out who's the pawn? How do I find out who's the bishop and the queen and the king? How do I find I'm the king? I mean, I'm probably the king, but I mean, the other ones, how do I find everybody else?
You're the king. I get it. You're fine. You can be the king if you want to. Everyone's coming after you. That's great.
Yeah, I'm the one they
Uh,
want to kill. I get it.
I'll just be the pawn. You just sacrifice
Yeah,
me as needed, or I'll protect you, whatever it needs
right.
to. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's a big that's probably tip number two that we're leaning into here for managers is first of all know what winning is and make sure everybody else does and that they have a clear role in terms of what winning is. Tip number two is to understand your pieces. We've done some really interesting exercises on delegation. It's something that we've gone out to conferences and done on how to delegate because delegation is probably the top skill that limits people's ability to become executives or administrators is you were great as a supervisor, you're working the front lines, and then as you become a manager, you need to be able to delegate your skills to other people. And then they struggle with that. So we do these delegation workshops, and one of the things we talk about is taking an inventory of your team, kind of knowing what your pieces can do. And everybody, when we first start that exercise, it's interesting to watch the room. I don't know if you'd agree with this, Matt, is everybody kind of rolls their eyes like, oh, I know my people. Like, I know my people. You don't know your people. And then we ask some pretty basic questions like, what do your people, how do your people like to be recognized? Not your people as a group, but your individual people. Who likes a candy bar? Who likes everybody to stand up and clap for them? Who likes just a word of encouragement? Who wants a gift? Who wants whatever, how do people like to be recognized? And then what are the individual strengths of the person? You can think there's lots of ways to be able to measure that. You can do a strengths finder, you can do a DISC assessment. We have what's called a hiring suite assessment where you can look at profiles of people. We're not all the same. We have different strengths. Do you really know what the strengths are of your individual person just in terms of their personality? Do you know their communication style? We've talked about that before. Do you know if they're a whiteboarder or are they an outliner or are they an empathizer or are they a go-getter? Do you even know what their experiences are? There's been lots of times, we work with a hospital that one of their administrators used to manage restaurants. And he's the CFO now. Give a shout out to Marty over Horizon Health. And so he oversees that. Horizon figured out that, hey, he's kind of a foodie and he's managed restaurants before. So he manages their dietary team to manage the cafeteria downstairs. So it makes sense to do that. You wouldn't normally, if you didn't know that your CFO used to a long time ago manage restaurants, you probably it wouldn't be a natural thing to say, oh, it makes sense to have my CFO in charge of the cafeteria. Normally you wouldn't do that, but because they knew what that piece did, it's out there. And then when we do this exercise with teams, it's amazing how the managers kind of come back and they sheepishly go like, I don't know my people half as well as I thought I did. I don't know what that looks like. So yeah, I think it takes a
I,
deliberate process.
I would even add to that just a little bit too, and I'm not going to mention any names, but a lot of times whenever we start talking about their people, it's almost got a negative context to it. It's almost got a negative context to it, like, oh, I don't have anybody on the team that would fit that piece. There's nobody that works here that would fit that piece. And we kind of pigeonhole people, or we start to, I don't know, as a manager, we start to, it's almost the glass is half empty, so to speak. And maybe I get it. Maybe you've been doing this for 10 years now and you've seen them come and go and maybe I don't know, maybe for the manager, you need to kind of take a step back away and have a conversation with yourself about what am I trying to do? In order for me to be able to relay to the team what it is that we're trying to do, you might have to answer that for yourself. What am I passionate about? Where do I see myself fitting in to the organization of this team as well? Like, am I the driver? Am I the helper? And maybe you have to be really, really clear about that role for yourself, which might sound funny because I get it. You have the title of manager or boss, but maybe you shouldn't always wear that hat and have a little bit of humility to say, I have somebody on my team that's better at that part of my job than I am, and I'm more than happy to delegate that responsibility too. That's where you start to kind of see, you use the word aligned earlier, and I know we've talked about this, but maybe in the context of what this is, the empowerment, the alignment, some managers are going to work right now thinking, okay, I just need to go back and tell them that they can go and do that and pass on this level of empowerment. And I don't think it's that easy, right? If I'm a manager, how do I create the space for people to become empowered, or how do I show that to them that not only do I think you're capable of this, I want you in this space as well. Not only do I think you're capable, but you have my blessing in this too. Like, what are some things that a manager can do to try to create that on the team?
Well, this probably leads to the third tip that we were talking about before that you kind of hinted to is that we have to think ahead. You have to think a few moves ahead. You have to take the piece out for a spin to see what it can kind of do, right? So like the analogy is like imagine you have your queen, right? If you don't play chess, the queen can move in any direction as far as you want it to go until it runs into another piece. It can't go over a piece, but as far as it can go in any direction. If you play chess and you didn't know the rules of chess but you knew it could only go one, and you thought it could only go one space at a time in any direction, you're still playing by the rules, but you're very much limiting the potential of that piece. So, the tip 2 is learn what the piece can do. But I mean, tip 3 might be like, take it out for a spin. Like, think a few moves ahead and see what it can do. Like, okay, cool. Let's try to move not only queen, I want you to now position yourself where you can go take that rook over here. Like, let's see if you can do this. Like, you're not telling the queen to go win the game. You're telling the queen to do a very specific thing that you're going to need for the team to be able to win the game. And you're putting them in a position where maybe you're even testing them to see if they can even do something whether you knew that they could do it or not.
I think you just stumbled upon one of the other things that I just learned with this. As I'm trying that, then I learned that they could, whenever I was initially, when you start playing chess, you're trying to protect the king and the queen, trying to protect those two. So you're surrounding it with a buffer. But then you also recognize, wait a second, this queen can go everywhere, right? And so I've started, and again, I'm 0-5. I'm still learning strategy, but I've started to also now use the queen as an offensive, not just a defensive too, right? And I think that's another one. Let me stretch the legs of the capabilities of what these pieces might be able to do. And I think that's a tremendous tip. If you are a person on the team, a manager of the team, and maybe you've already kind of labeled what people do and what they don't do, you might be missing something. Especially your highly engaged people, they don't want to continue to do the same thing over and over and over again that you hired them originally to do. They want to show you that they are capable of doing more, and you don't know what they're capable of until you kind of take them out for a spin, kind of like Don was talking about there. Maybe that person that has nothing to contribute in the meetings, you think that they don't care, they're going through the motions. I would venture to say that they know quite a bit more than what you think that they are, that they do know. And they're probably that way. If we went on site and asked them why it is that they don't maybe volunteer for some of those things, I bet we'd hear some pretty tremendous stories about, well, I tried to do that, but it didn't work out, or I tried to do that, but they never give me the opportunity to do this. I'm working toward, we've heard this. I know I work in this space, but I'm actually working towards a degree or a certification in this, and I'm really kind of curious about that lane. So I'm just biding my time, waiting for this job to, my certification to come over, and then I'm out of here. I'm going to go this way, but the manager didn't know it. They didn't know it because they hadn't taken him out for a spin, or maybe even had the conversation with that too. So I agree with you. Instead of maybe keeping Janice in the corner all the time because that's where we think Janice wants to be, maybe Janice is capable of more than just sitting in the corner knocking out the work that you originally hired Janice to do.
Yeah, I would guess again, there's some managers who are listening to this going like, well, I have too many pawns and I need more queens on my team. And what we would say is that maybe you're playing your queens like pawns. And I think we do that pretty consistently of like, okay, we go into a team, or we'll tell stories at conferences about teams who do extraordinary things. And you'll say, okay, and this queen took this piece, took the rook, and then positioned themselves in front of the knight and then defended everybody else while you moved my own, pieces in and surrounded the king and won the game, using the chess analogies. And then people are like, well, I would love to find that piece. I don't have that piece. And then when we go to work with them, we say, actually, that piece already works for you. You're just not using them right. If you keep your queen, again, using the chess analogy, if you keep your queen back to protect your king all of the time, and they're just sitting there, literally forming a shield, you're using your queen like a pawn. And then you're blaming your queen for being a pawn when your queen doesn't want to be a pawn either. Your queen wants to be a queen. So it fits where the pieces do better when they get to do what they do better, which I think is a really good analogy.
And this is ever evolving, and maybe this goes to that next tip, or one of the last tips that I thought we could maybe pass along with this is each time that you test this out, I think it's an easy thing for a manager to say, well, let me stretch the legs on that. And what if it doesn't go as well as you thought it was going to go, right? You maybe listen to this podcast, you're all energized, you're going to find out who the team is, you're going to stretch the legs, and it was a giant failure. I don't know. The only way that what I would say is the only way that you would know that it's a failure is if you stop and immediately go back and revert back to what it was that you were doing before. Each time that I am losing all of these games right now, all of these matches, I lost to Don also in the airport there. Each time I'm losing, like, I'm learning. Right. I'm learning. I'm not going to fall back into that same mistake that I did last night. My wife made a beautiful move with her rook and I countered it with a bishop. And I thought, nailed it, right? Blocked it. And it did not block it because the bishop doesn't go the direction that I was hoping it would go. It was right next to the rook. You could have just knocked it over, but it doesn't go side to side. It goes diagonally. And so I thought I was proud of myself, but then I thought, okay, well, lesson learned. I need to remember that going forward. And so as you're going through this, we definitely wouldn't. I mean, great managers are only great managers because they went through a series of probably some humbling moments there. And maybe I would imagine that you had those days where you have been humbled, and I would just encourage you to keep that humility as one of your leadership traits as well. Like, what can you learn as you're testing this out? What can you learn, and how can you adapt that going forward?
Yeah, and again, if you're thinking several moves ahead, it's like, how can I put people in a position where they could lose a game, but not lose a game that's critical where you lose everything, where you sold your chessboard or you put your car up for as a bet to win the game or something like that.
Right.
You have to be thinking about how can you fail small, but fail forward and help your team understand what that failure looks like. I also think, we talk about succession planning a lot, and it's something that puzzles me. It's something that is not a hard process. I think sometimes company organizations make that really hard, like it has to be some big universal, like we have to think of everybody and who would be their successor and all that. That's not a hard process if every manager is thinking who could be next, who's going to come in next for this. And it's another chess analogy like you talked about is you might fail. You might move the queen in a position. And Matt, when you and I played, I managed to take your queen early in the game, and I had my queen. I was playing around the board, and then I got a little cocky, and I got my queen into danger, and you took my queen back
Yeah.
and kind of even the playing field. Well, fortunately, I was already thinking, okay, what's next? Who's going to come in next and play the role of harassing you behind the scenes here to be able to do this? And I had something already ready for that. I had moved something out of the way to get a position of peace ready for that. If every manager is thinking about that, then succession planning doesn't become that hard. If you start thinking, okay, I've got to get this piece. It might be a pawn today, but how do I get it where someday it could be a more powerful piece for what we are going to need in the future? And then how do I put you in a position? And Matt, I love what you said as the fourth recommendation is let your people fail. In fact, fail more, fail more frequently, fail forward, fail small, so that you learn, because you've learned a lot from those 6 losses that you've had. You're like the Chicago Cubs of the chess world right now.
Yeah, my day's coming though. I'm learning, I'm growing. Anyway, and this is our we had a good time talking about this. This is our hope that you would, even if you don't understand chess, hopefully you're picking up on all these things that we're talking about here. Hopefully you're understanding kind of the analogies that we're making back and forth between the game and what management actually looks like too. And you've experienced this. Maybe you haven't played the game, but what we're talking about, man, hopefully some of that hits home. What if last spin, because I could just hear Diana's on my shoulder right here going, what about the employee? What about not just the manager? What about the employee? What if I'm an employee and I feel like I'm only being looked at as a pawn? But I think I'm capable of more. Like, how do I start that conversation to try to increase my not only my exposure but abilities as well?
I love that question. You're right, Diana would be asking that question. And I think the answer to that is like, if you are sitting back as the player on a chessboard, and I think about like, where do you sit? You sit above the chessboard. You're looking down at it. You can see the entire chessboard. If you can imagine, and you can go like to a Harry Potter movie or something where they play the wizard chess and they are the pieces. I would imagine sitting there as the piece, as a pawn, you're sitting inside the board now. It would be very difficult to see what's happening across the entire board. So I would guess that as a piece on the board, first of all, recognize that you may not see what the winning the game looks like, which means you probably should be asking questions. Like what can winning the game look like? And then how can I contribute to that? If you're asking questions of saying, what does winning look like? Like, what do you really care about, boss? What do you care about, manager? And then how can I support you in that? Then what you might find is you might find an opportunity to do something, and the manager might say, boy, we really got to take that rook over there because it's causing us a lot of problems and it's threatening us over here. And then if you can suddenly take that, then suddenly your manager goes, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And that helps us to win the game. And suddenly now you've got more attention. But it's not pay attention to me because I could do more. It's pay attention to me because I can help you win, if that makes sense. I think you've got to talk to the master player, so to speak, and find out what winning the game really looks like, and then ask how you can contribute.
I love what you just said too about, and again, I'm with you. I just keep thinking about, man, possibilities with this. But if I'm the manager, you're overlooking the entire chessboard. if I'm the pawn on the front row, my vision is probably just like this, where I'm just looking at the there's an entire army in front of me.
There's a lot of pawns in front
Feels
of me.
good back. I don't know. There's a lot of threats in front of
How
me.
did I get
don't
this job on the front line? Why do I have to stare down all these folks?
Yeah, he's like the drummer that went ahead, of the old militias there. Like, I have no weapon at all. I have nothing. I'm blowing a bugle, for crying out loud. What am I supposed to do? Uh, and I think maybe sometimes as a manager, it's up to us to help them understand what that value maybe they bring to the table too. So anyway, we hope that you enjoyed this topic. I'm with you. I think we could have talked about it for a while there, and I think there's more to come on this topic. Each, you can imagine what a workshop potentially would look like with that too. So I'm excited about what we do with it next. But hopefully you enjoyed this. Share this with somebody else that you feel might be interested in the topic too. Share the podcast. Don, we're in the conference circuit right now. We're traveling all over the place. We have a couple days home before we head out and see our friends in Iowa. And then we're going to go over to the National Association for Orthopedic Executives in Chicago after that. Then back to Breckenridge, Colorado for a Colorado MGMA and Iowa HLA. Like, we're going to see a lot of friends here coming up soon. And we always talk about the podcast. And no matter where we are in the country, it seems like we have people coming up to us going, "Hey, I'm already a subscriber to the podcast." I love it. Like, this is great. And so feel free to interact with us if you see us out and about. We love talking to you. And if you have other friends that you'd like to introduce us to as well, you think they could benefit from our content, feel free to share it. It's free. The podcast is free. So anyway, if you have other topics that you'd like to discuss, listen to the outro here and they'll tell you more. But until next time, everybody, we'll see you later.
We'll see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the People Centered Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.